Welcome back to the channel. We're back with our first Halloween week commander. We have a little bit of time between the Spider-Man hype and when we're getting the new announcements for the Avatar Last Airbender commanders. So this week we'll just be covering some Halloween themed commanders. Some based off of iconic monsters like vampires, werewolves, zombies. Some just with some creepy stuff like insects. Doing the birds because Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds was a pretty cool Halloween movie. But overall, the first one we're doing here today is Zask, Skittering Swarmlord. For 3 and 2 green, you get 5/5, where you may play lands and insects from your graveyard, and whenever another insect you control dies, put it on the bottom of its owner's library, then you can mill 2 cards. Cost to pay 1 and a black or a green, allowing you access to black in the deck. To give target insect +1/+0 and dot touch. Only consists of one of your insects, not all of your insects. So we have a whole bunch of insects in this deck that will make sure we keep getting from our graveyard. Other ways to make sure we're manipulating our graveyard, getting more stuff into our graveyard, since we can't play insect, sacrifice insect, get insect back since it goes to the bottom of the library. But overall, bunch of ones with enters abilities, ones with dies abilities, some fun landfall abilities we'll be getting to in a little bit. But that's just a general overview of the deck and the week. Let's get into it card by card. Starting us off, we have Altered Dementia. They sacrifice a creature to mill some cards. We could also potentially have our opponent mill some cards. That's not going to be the way we're going to win the game, though. This is mostly just here so we could get some more insects into our graveyard, some more lands into our graveyard. This way we have more insects and lands to cast from our graveyard. Well, cast lands, but you know what I mean. Ashnod's Altar in order to sacrifice a creature to get 2 colorless mana. Sometimes that creature is going to be getting removed anyway, so having a sacrifice outlet is going to be helpful here. Altered Dementia also helpful sacrifice outlet for some of our other abilities, as is this. We have some abilities that only require the 2 colorless mana, some abilities that just need the 1, so this helps us out with that as well. Some abilities where we actually just want our creatures to die, but like I said, we'll get to that in a little bit. Conduit of the Worlds, you're not always going to have your commander on the battlefield. Big aspect of this deck is trying to play lands from your graveyard. Maybe we have a strip mine that we're trying to repeat from our graveyard again and again so that our opponents can't play anything. But also another way to play stuff other than just your insects from the graveyard. Lightning Grease, a little bit of protection there for Zask, and also make sure our insects can attack the turn they come in. We have a couple in here, like Giant Adaphage, that have abilities that say when they deal damage, you get an effect. And also, giving them that Death Touch plus the haste, it's going to be helpful. Well, you have to give them the Death Touch and then give them the Lightning Grease, because they'll have the Shroud, so it does counteract itself a little bit there, but still, super helpful for that protection for Zask. Mesmeric Orb, another way to mill ourselves a little bit, also basically shuts off certain tutors for our opponents. Because a lot of them just say put it on top of their deck. And by the time they draw it, they're going to be milling it, because they had to tap a land to do that. But either way, super good card for us too, making sure we get our insects and our lands into the graveyard so that we have a place, something to cast from the graveyard. Skull Clamp, we don't have a lot of like 1/1 insects, but we have enough where Skull Clamp is worth putting in this deck. Where this way you could pay to 1, destroy one of your insects, and draw 2 cards. And everyone loves a pot of greed. Soul Ring for some additional mana, and Swiftfoot Boots. For the same reason as Lightning Grease, like I said, giving our creatures haste and that little bit of protection is going to be helpful, and it doesn't shut off Zask's ability with this one. For our creatures, we have Etchik, Emerald Radiant. For 3, 2 black and a green, you get 3/3. When she enters, you get a 1/1 green insect token for each artifact or creature in your graveyard. We don't have that many artifacts, only 8, but we do have 28 creatures. So if you have, like, all 27 other creatures and all your artifacts in the graveyard, that's 35 1/1s you're getting there. And then you use Skull Clamp on all of them and you draw out your entire deck. But also whenever another insect you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Achek, and each opponent loses life. There's that real big benefit off of sacrificing our creatures in order to get that ability. Also, we're getting all those insects, and you just cast her from the graveyard using Zask's ability. 2, Swarm's Hunger. For 3, a black and a green flying menace. Other insects you control also have menace. It can be super helpful, especially if we're able to give them the Death Touch. This way they could remove more than one of our opponent's creatures. And whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you get a 1/1 insect creature token. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on equal to greatest mana value among those cards. You only can do it once each turn, but play that one land from our graveyard each turn. Well, it doesn't get any +1/+1 counters, but then you could Skull Clamp it. And it also has Menace. And Queen, another good insect for 3 and 2 green, you get 5/5, which could get you some more insect tokens just by paying 2 mana. You do that as long as you have the mana for it. If you have your Astronaut's Altar and the insect token, you're already going almost neutral on that. You just need the extra green mana, which if you have not Alter Dementia, I forgot what the other card is called. The one that you can sacrifice a creature, get 1, like green mana or something. Anyway, Blight Beetle, protection from green. Creatures your opponents control can have +1/+1 counters put on them. Helps us shut down those +1/+1 counters. A little bit of stacks there, but also just a cheap insect we can get from our graveyard. This way we could have it get removed in order to mill some more insects. Brood Hatch Nantuko, a lot of good insects from the new Edge of Eternity set. Whenever Brood Hatch Nantuko is dealt damage, you may create that many 1/1 insect tokens. We actually know this one's not from Edge of Eternities. But yeah, getting all those 1/1 insects, something more Skull Clamp, some more creatures give that menace to way swinging to win game. It's only a 1/1, so it does hinder us just a little bit, but you can still block a 20/20 with it. As long as it doesn't have trample, like you're not taking any damage, it's just taking all 20, you're getting 21 ones, and no one was going to want to attack you. Caustic Caterpillar, another creature that could get removed pretty easily. You pay 1 in a green, sacrifice it to get a little bit of removal on the board. And that also gets us set mill 2 with Zask. Circuit Mender enters, get to gain 2 life, leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Doesn't necessarily care about dying, so you don't have to worry about like, well, put on the bottom of its owner's library, then mill 2 cards. Okay, so things do still hit the graveyard with Zask's ability. I thought it said an instead effect. I thought it was like a replacement effect. But yeah, no, you still get that draw power, something easy to sacrifice to get some mana off of it. We like to see it. Crash of Rhino Beetle's Trample. Crash of Rhino Beetle is +10/+10 as long as you control 10 or more lands, which, you know, milling our deck, playing lands from our graveyard, playing some additional lands each turn, it's not going to be like the hardest thing to get to. Giant Adaphage Trample. Whenever Giant Adaphage deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of Giant Adaphage. We start off at 1, we go to 2, we go to 4, give it a Swiftfoot boost to make sure that the first one can attack the turn it comes down, because otherwise it's getting removed, probably, or your opponent's next turn. And then you're just getting board wiped either way, so it doesn't really matter. Giant Ankeg, Trample, Ward 2, other creatures control Trample and Ward 2, giving that Trample to our other insects. I mean, most of them are 1/1s, but yeah, sometimes could still be helpful to have the Trample on them, and also the Ward 2 to protect Zask is going to be helpful for that as well. Also, the nice thing with these ones, plus Zask's ability, is that since they have the trample, if you give them the death touch, they only need to deal the 1 to the creature, and then the rest gets dealt to your opponent's face. Haywire Might, when it gets removed, you get gain 2 life, sacrifice it for a little bit of removal. Same thing as the Caustic Caterpillar earlier, just 1 colorless mana and only 1 green rather than 1 in a green for the activated ability. Horizon Explorer, lands you control, enter untapped, can be super helpful for this deck, especially with how much landfall. Well, we don't have like many landfall abilities, but how many lands we're getting from our graveyard. This way we can keep on using them. And yeah, and then also get some lander tokens, get some more lands. We like lands in this deck. Hornet Nest Defender, whenever this creature is dealt damage, create that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying death touch. It only has 2 toughness, but like I said, same thing with, I forgot its name. Broodhatch Nantuko. It doesn't need to only create 2 1/1s. You can get 20 1/1s if you're blocking in 20/20 that doesn't have trample. The trample does only deal 2 to it though, so like if you are blocking something with trample, just make sure that you remember that. Hornet Queen, Flying Death Touch, gets more 1/1s with Flying Death Touch when it enters. Keep getting it back from our deck, since we can't get it from the graveyard, but still, super helpful ability for us there. Huskburster Swarm, spell costs 1 less cast for each creature card you own in exile or in graveyard, minus Death Touch 6/6. We're going to attempt to get it for that 1 black, given how many cards we're milling, so we like to see it. Ice Tail Explorer, whenever a land you control, you may play additional land on each of your turns, allowing us 2 lands from our graveyard, potentially, Evolving Wilds, sack, and there you go. And you also can play lands from your graveyard, another good ability there. And whenever a land you control enters, you get to mill a card, getting us more insects into our graveyard. This card is like really made for Zask, but I mean it's really good in a lot of landfall decks too, so yeah. Zoning 1009. Whenever Zoning 1009 enters the battlefield, get a 1/1 insect token for each creature in your graveyard. We're going to be milling a lot. We're going to have a lot of cards in our graveyard. You're going to be getting a lot of 1/1s that will sacrifice with Skull Clam. I actually have a lot more things for Skull Clam in here than I remember putting in here. Living Hive, Trample. Living Hive deals common damage to a player. Create that many 1/1 green insect tokens. Put them right onto the battlefield. Getting those abilities that we like to see. Once again, giving that Trample plus the Death Touch. The 1 damage gets dealt to the creature. The remaining 5 gets dealt to your opponent. You get those 5 1/1s. Give it the Trample, the Haste with the... no, you don't give it Trample. You just give it Haste. Already has Trample. With Swiftfoot Boots. I'd see it. Mazarak, Crawl, Death Priest, flying whenever you sacrifice another permanent or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It's an insect. We're sacrificing things like not that often, but often enough where like this really comes in handy. Might Form Harmonizer whenever a land you control enters, double the power target creature you control. You can also warp this in for just a 2 in the green, which is going to be super helpful because then we play that. Maybe we have like a Living Hive. We can put the Swiftfoot Boots on. Not the Lightning Greaves though, because it is target creature. This is something to keep in mind because it will have the Shroud. But still, that'll be a lot of insects. Moldgraph Millipede. You get a creature with a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it for each creature card in the graveyard. Trying to have a lot of them in the graveyard, so that's a lot of +1/+1 counters. Nantuko Elder. Basically Manador, just a little bit different, a little bit more expensive, but a little bit more mana as well. Old Rustarn. Scroll down a little bit. Enters battlefield or at the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. Getting more cards into our graveyard. If land's milled this way, get a treasure token. If creature cards milled this way, create a 1/1 insect creature token. Non-creature, non-land cards milled this way, you get a blood token. Which allows us to get some more stuff out of our hand into our graveyard, which is going to be helpful because sometimes we don't always want stuff in our hand. We want some other stuff in our hand, maybe like this in our hand rather than an insect in our hand. Scoop Mob, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 5 or more lands, put 4 +1/+1 counters on Scoop Mob. It's only the beginning of your upkeep, so like it doesn't get as out of hand as Scoot Swarm, but still out of hand enough where you're having a 5/5 for only 1 mana. Scoot Swarm, I think we all know what Scoot Swarm does. You're getting a lot of Scoot Swarms. Rule 782, there are always more Scoot Bugs. Fun fact, that's also Survival Rule 781. Siege... You can read on the Scoop Mob. Siege Ship Bruton there. Whenever this creature enters milled cards, let's get more lands, more insects into our graveyard. You can also pay some mana, sacrifice this creature, turn creature or spacecraft, which we don't have in this deck, from your graveyard to the battlefield, getting something that costs less than 5. Sir Red the Grim. We'll be milling our deck a whole bunch, which means milling a lot of creatures, which means Sir Conrad gives us a chance to burn out our opponent. Swarm Weaver enters, create 2 1/1 insect creature tokens with flying. As long as there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, insects and spiders you control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. We don't need to use that activated ability with that. That'll come in handy doing just that. Nope, we have Planeswalkers, can't scroll to the second half yet. Crawling Infestation helps us mill some cards every turn. If we mill a creature, if we mill a creature, we get some more insects. We like to see it. Crawling Sensation, same exact thing, except if you mill a land rather than milling a creature. It's also whenever a land is put into graveyard from anywhere, it doesn't necessarily have to be the top of the deck. Same thing with the Crawling Infestation. So, if you have like a strip mine, sacrifice a strip mine, blow up your opponent's land, we'll like to see it. Dead Bridge Chant. Oops, sorry, my nose got really stuffy. Dead Bridge Chant enters, mill 10 cards, beginning of your upkeep, choose a card in random, get it back onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. We'd like to see it. Exploration, allows us to play some additional lands every turn. Why stop at 1 strip mine when you get all the strip mines? Moldivar Reclamation, creature you control dies, gain a life, draw a card. I'd like to see it. We'll be discarding those cards potentially. This way we could get them cast out of the graveyard. Ripples of Undeath. Basically a Sylvan Library, except you're putting stuff into your graveyard instead of back on top. And you'll pay some mana and some life to do it. Terravol's Judgment. We're going to be casting stuff from our graveyard, be playing lands from our graveyard. Whenever one of those things leaves our graveyard, we either draw a card, get a treasure token, or get a zombie creature token. We like all those things. And scrolling over to the second half of the deck. For our instance, we have Assassin's Trophy for some removal, Beast Within for some removal, Crop Rotation, good way to sacrifice a land, this way you get more lands. I like that ability. And Distress Restoration, once again, sacrificing some lands, getting more lands. We're going to be having a 5/5 with Zask on the board, so that'll allow us to get those additional lands off the secondary part of that ability. Grizzly Salvage, allowing us to mill some more cards, putting the one that we actually want back into our hand. Harrow and Rolling Regrowth, once again, sacrificing those lands, get more lands. And Heroic Intervention, just a good source of protection there. For lands, we have Field of the Dead, which, we're going to be having 7 or more lands with different names, so that's not going to be hard to do. We have some sacrifice lands with cards like Fabled Passage. That's a bounce land. Strip Mine to sacrifice for removing our opponent's lands. Riveteer's Outlook. Just a land that goes right to the graveyard. And then for our Planeswalkers, we have Grist, Hunger Tide. As long as Grist is still on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 insect creature token in addition to its other types, which means that you can cast it from your graveyard with Zask's ability. For its +1 ability, you create a insect token, mill a card. If it's creature token, if an insect's milled this way, you get to do it again. You also keep getting those loyalty counties every time you do that. And then maybe you'll get to its ult, which is -5. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, which how much we're milling. That'll be a lot. It also has a -2. You may sacrifice a creature, destroy target creature or planeswalker for a little bit of removal. It's nice. This is his larva form, where it's a 1/2 with Death Touch. You can cast from your graveyard whenever Grist Voracious Larva. Another creature enters the battlefield under your control. Enter from your graveyard, pay 1, exile this card, transform back into its planeswalker form of Grist Plague Swarm. Pay +1 is create a 1/1 insect token. Put a Death Touch counter on the token. And, yeah. Wait. Yeah. And then -6 is for each creature in your graveyard. Create a 1/1 insect token, which is going to be pretty hard to get because you have to get +1 3 times, so it has to be on the board for 4 turns. For our sorcerers, Beacon Creation can a whole bunch of insects for each forest we control, which, we have 3, but we have more ways to make everything into a forest with Yavimaya. Blasphemous Edict for a board wipe. Buried Alive, get our best insects that we want in the graveyard, not having to wait for them to be milled. Cultivate for some ramp, Nature's Lore for some ramp. Patriarch's Blessing, each player chooses a creature type, we're going to be choosing insect. Returns all creatures of that type back to the battlefield, getting all of our insects back from our graveyard without having to cast them. I take that deal. Rampant Growth for some ramp, Splendid Reclamation. Like I said, we're going to be milling a lot, so we'll likely be milling some lands, and we can't play them all with Zask's ability, so we're going to be needing another way to get them back. Swarmlord Massacre, create 2 1/1 squirrel creature tokens, then each creature that isn't an insect, rat, spider, or squirrel gets -1/-1 on turn for each insect, rat, spider, or squirrel you control. aka we're board wiping our opponents, keeping all of our creatures on the board. 3 visits for some more ramped, and victimize in order to recur some of our creatures back to the battlefield. Well, that's the video there. Seems my dog has come over wanting to play one of his toys, so stay tuned for more Hollow Week. Thanks for watching and have a great day.